Is this your first time at OWASP? All right. Well, welcome. How many of you know what OWASP is? Okay. All right. So OWASP is a global 501c3 organization dedicated to improving the security of software for applications or whatever you want to call them. We do that in a lot of different ways. The primary being what you're seeing right now, which is all the local chapter meetings. There are local chapter meetings worldwide. I see ones like opening up all over the place, Romania and Hungary and Middle East and wherever else, and a whole bunch here in the area. There's one in New York. I think there's one in Delaware, but I'm not sure. There's definitely one in Northern Virginia. They're a pretty great group. Almost formerly run by this guy right here. Two more. OWASP does a lot of other things too. You should check out the website, OWASP.org. There's a lot of open source software that OWASP writes. There's a lot of standards and paperwork and guides. I mean, there's like free 300-page books written by the best people in the industry on how to do things right. It is a fantastic resource for how to do software security. So yeah, please look it up. Us, OWASP DC, we meet the first Wednesday of every month, except August, because that's when DEFCON happens, and a lot of people are not here. So we drop it back by a week. So the first Wednesday of every month, we will be here talking about stuff. If you have something that you want to talk about, talk to us, talk to me, talk to Ronaldo, talk to somebody else. If you have something you want to talk about, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, hey, it's like a little tiny thing, and I really like to talk about it, but I don't really want to come up in front of people and do something for an entire hour, hour and a half. Please let us know too, because we've had a few people come up and say, hey, can we do a 15-minute talk? And if we get enough people saying, hey, 15-minute talks, we'll just do a night of fire talks or free or whatever you want to call it, which would be a lot of fun. I'd actually really enjoy that. I've got a lot of things I'd like to talk about for 15 minutes. So yeah, please let us know. What else? Am I forgetting anything? Yeah, so that's most of it. Thank you for coming. And those of you on the webcast, thank you. I hope you like it. Round 2 webcast, so hopefully it works.
Before we start, yep. And then Ross.
I'm going to. Yep.
Sorry.
I'll actually do reverse since I'm already here. So one last thing, we are in the wonderful Uber offices, not associated with Uber the car service. They do a really wonderful job of hosting us, and as you see, there's a lot of small companies, startups, open office space around here, flexible office space. They are really, 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 really nice about hosting us here every month. We don't have to pay for this, which is amazing. If you or your company or anybody you know is interested, talk to Jasmine. You'll see her on the way out. She doesn't like public speaking, which is why I'm doing this. But they're a really great place, and you should come here and do this. And before I introduce our speaker, Brian, like to have Brian come up and talk a little bit about people who pay for pizza.
So one of the things that I really love about this meetup is the universal appeal of its subject matter, and I should put that in scare quotes because it's universal appeal of people in our industry. I don't agree that it's appealing, but content security policy is it seems pretty specific when you first look at it, but if you're a developer, you should definitely know about this. If you're an application security specialist, you should be an expert on this. If you're a network security guy, you should probably know about it. And if you're a business analyst, if you're a project manager, you should know what's going on behind the scenes. So I love coming to these meetups so I can learn something specific and bring it back to my company, Excella Consulting, and kind of transfer the knowledge to a lot of people there. And knowledge is not the only thing I would like to bring back to Excella. I would like to bring back 1 or 2 of you guys. Is that a good segue? Is that a good segue?
Well done.
Not tonight. Not tonight.
You're going down the right path anyway.
Excella is hiring. Excella is hiring. We're a consulting firm based out of the courthouse. We serve the Beltway and inside and outside. We do mostly software development and DevOps and some project management, and we also do Scrum training as well if anybody has needs there. But right now we're really heavy. We're looking for Ruby developers, and we're looking for DevOps specialists, experts. So thank you again, and you want to introduce?
Yeah,
Okay.
just very briefly. I mean,
All right, thank you.
I got it. So very briefly for me, then we'll turn it over. Joe Ladoya from Invisium. He's going to talk about government security policy. I taught this last week at OWASP Nova, and it was pretty cool. So yeah, I hope you liked it.
Welcome. So the title of my talk is called Content Security, Past, Present, and Future. It's also going to dictate, how we explore the content security policy ecosystem. We'll talk about the spec, we'll talk about tooling, and we'll talk about CSP from various perspectives. I am Jeller. I am an application security consultant at Invisium. You're welcome to follow me on Twitter. I mostly talk about AppSec, cycling, and coffee, and nothing else. And yeah, so that's my Twitter handle. So my goal today is for everybody here to walk out and think CSP is awesome. That's my main goal. And it's something that's old but new. It's been actually CSP, content security policy, has been around for a while, but we really don't see it implemented. And so my goal is for everybody to just walk out, whether you're a pen tester or whether you're a developer or network security, I want you to actually believe in CSP, because it really can improve the security of a site. This is a headline from December 16, 2014. Did anybody see anything like this in December? Something about CSP and Gmail. Anybody? No? No? Okay, that's fine. Jack did. I saw this. I got really excited when I saw this, and all of you should have. But we're going to talk about why this is awesome and why it's taking a while for a company like Google to actually implement it in their products. And it's taken a while for this browser security control to actually get pushed to sites. So how many of you are familiar with CSP? Anybody? Couple? Okay, cool. Now, how many of you are familiar with XSS or injection vulnerabilities? So the majority of you are. This is actually where the two merge. We can use CSP to actually reduce the risk of injection vulnerabilities. We're not fixing them. We're just making sure that they're very difficult to exploit. So in a way, it's an additional layer of security. And companies like Google and Twitter have actually implemented and thus are protecting us. So let's start in the past. What is CSP? So CSP was developed by, I think, Mozilla way back in the day, 2012. The spec has existed for a while. The W3C spec has existed for a while. It's not a W3C recommendation yet, but it's going through that flow. What is CSP? Ultimately, CSP is a mechanism to basically whitelist resources. So we're talking about fonts. We're talking about images. And what that ultimately does is basically a developer can say, here's how I want my site to behave. And the moment there's an injection vulnerability on my site and attempts to make a call out to evil.com, that call will not, that call will just get blocked because of CSP. It's an opt-in browser security mechanism, meaning a company like Gmail or Twitter, they add this additional header, the browser then sees it, and then based on the CSP policy will enable or disable certain calls. Any questions thus far? And if you guys are welcome to ask me questions as well. This is, no? Okay, excellent. This is what a CSP header actually looks like. You may have seen like a cache control header, but that is what a CSP, so there's two views. There's the top and then there's the bottom. The one at the bottom definitely allows you to see definitely certain aspects of the CSP header. It's more readable. We're going to talk about exactly what that is, but if you've never seen it, this is what the header looks like. And you'll see it in the response. So we talked about how CSP can mitigate injection vulnerabilities. How exactly could a browser do that? Any thoughts? Like, what's the difference between case 1 and case 2? Well, okay, so the difference is that in case 1, a browser doesn't know when a developer writes, you know, I want to do this, I want to do that. That's great. But the moment there's an injection vulnerability, there's really no difference from the browser's perspective. The browser is just going to run it all. And that's really the main difference. The main difference is that in case number 2, the developer intended to write this logic by calling this JavaScript library. And as a result, he can actually whitelist that library. And the moment execution of JavaScript happens outside this library, the browser is then able to say, I don't think this is what I'm supposed to do. Any questions or thoughts about that? So again, the concept of CSP is to whitelist. And the moment you're able to whitelist is the moment you can detect behavior outside that deviates.
Is case 2 in conjunction with what you had in the config file on the previous slide?
No, that was just a random CSP header. This is just Twitter's CSP header. I just wanted you, everybody to get a sense of, you know, it's a header and there's various components to it. And I'm going to talk about those exactly in a little bit. Actually, I'm going to talk about them right now. But so within the header, you have these directives. And in the first draft of the spec, we had about 10 or so. Actually, I'm not even entirely sure how many there were. But these are the main ones. These have existed. So let's just read them. So script source, object source, style source. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory. Image source, where images are able to load from. Script source, where JavaScript is able to load from. Media, where audio and video elements are able to load from. And then there's a couple here at the bottom. They're kind of interesting. Report URI and default source. So the moment there's a CSP violation, the browser will actually make a post request with JSON formatted data to whatever endpoint you specify. And we're going to talk about that in more detail further on. But that's report URI. Then there's default source. So default source is interesting in that it's basically if you don't specify, let's say, image source policy, and then you attempt to load an image from another domain, the browser then will see, hey, there's no image source policy. I'm going to then use the default source. So these are, you know, the various aspects of CSP. And, you know, let's just look at a particular example. So let's assume your CSP header said connect source equals example.com. Your site has an injection vulnerability. And then this particular JavaScript file is then trying to, so injection vulnerability, it's malicious, and it wants to make a WebSocket connection to evil.com. It's not going to work. It wants to make an XML HTTP request to evil.com. It's not going to work. It's only going to allow communication of WebSockets, of event source, of XML HTTP requests to the whitelisted domain. Is that clear? Cool. So this is, you know, this is another aspect here. Let's just quickly cover it. But CSP has, you know, thus far we've been talking about domains. But outside domains, there's actually special keywords like non, self, unsafe inline and unsafe eval. So if you say image source self, then the site is able to load images from the host, from itself, right? If you say none, the site is not going to be able to load any images. If you say unsafe inline or unsafe eval, then for one, they're a bit dangerous. So just be aware. But it means that you're then able to you're allowing inline JavaScript or CSS to be executed, which kind of defeats the purpose of CSP, but not really. CSP it's not a yes or no. It's actually like a scale. It's how safe do you want to make it? So with some of these keywords, you're going to the unsafe side. But that's one of the key aspects. CSP it's either very secure, or it's not very secure at all. So just having it doesn't mean anything. So this is going to be my last slide about CSP from a technical perspective of what it is. We talked about the various keywords. Let's talk about what CSP prevents, or what it doesn't like. And it ultimately doesn't like inline CSS. It doesn't like eval constructs. So eval, set timeout, set int. And it also doesn't like event handlers. So on mouse, on click. Those are things that you're going to have to refactor, or use one of the unsafe keywords like allow unsafe inline. Any thoughts on this?
Actually, I have a question from the previous slide.
Yeah.
Which directive requires you to have a non-scoping in your inline JavaScript?
Sorry, what was that?
Which directive from this slide, which directive requires non-scoping?
A nonce?
Yeah, inside your JavaScript tags.
Okay, so none.
Can you?
Not, okay.
Okay. So we were talking about a nonce, the concept of nonce in CSP, and we're going to talk about script hash and script source in a bit. But right now this is the past. So these concepts we're going to discuss those in the present. From my perspective, present is kind of like present time to like 6 months, whereas CSP has existed since 2012 and such. So we're going to talk about some of the new improvements of CSP later on. So back to unsafe inline and unsafe eval. So in this example right here, this is something that CSP does not like. And it's because, again, so we have inline script, you have this on-click event, and all of these is, these are snippets of code that as a developer, you're going to have to be forced to refactor. For the majority of it, yeah. Any thoughts, questions thus far? Anything? Okay. So what I have here are just sample CSP policies. The first one here in the top is what I call a realistic one. You're going to have to whitelist multiple domains. The one here at the bottom is what I call an unsafe, which is basically this is not introducing any of the improvements of CSP. You just introduce the header, and what's the point? So when you develop a CSP policy, one of the things to consider is XSS eliminated? Are you allowing Flash content? Are you allowing mixed content? Are you allowing any third-party content at all? And it's through answering these questions that will allow you to determine how secure or not secure your policy is. Because again, it's a balance. So simple exercise: is mixed content allowed? What are we thinking? Yes, no, maybe. Any thoughts? Is mixed content. What do we know what mixed content is? Yes, maybe. Okay, so the answer is yes. Mixed content is allowed, and it's because. So I was trying to. I was trying to trick you. What typically happens is that people will see this default source and they'll see HTTPS, and they just kind of assume that these policies cascade. But the reality is that image source allows both port 80 and port 443, so mixed content is allowed. Okay. Let's talk about, so that's CSP, what it is, how it behaves. There's actually two modes of CSP. And there's basically an enforcement mode and then a report only. And typically, if you attempt to implement CSP, it will break your site. So you probably want to start out in report only. It's just completely passive, and this is where you want to use the report URI. And I'm just going to jump out of this, and then I'm just going to show you. Let's just go to, we're going to go to Twitter. Or not.
Chiller, you said if you implement it, it would break the site. Is that on legacy code, you mean, if you just try to implement it?
No, I guess what I meant to say is that if you just attempt to push a CSP policy, initially you will most likely break the site because it's going to take a while for you to actually build the policy. And there's definitely tools, and I'm going to show you some of them. But initially, it's very difficult to know where your content is coming from, what third-party vendors you're actually communicating with, and so on. So it's not something that it's.
So it's because you're going to miss something on the whitelist that you create?
Correct, absolutely. So that's why you want to initially introduce CSP in report only. In report only, get violations, and I'm going to show you this. And then you just, over time, eventually develop a CSP policy that you're confident with. Did you have a question?
I was just going to say, along that same point then, I guess in your experience, do you see most of the hesitation for implementing CSP is because of rework of the code? Because you already mentioned that inline script statements aren't going to work anymore unless you do unsafe, which sort of defeats the point. So there's going to be a lot of rework of code. So
absolutely. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Refactoring is definitely something that if you're trying to implement CSP into your flagship product, it's most likely not going to be CSP compliant from the beginning, which is why companies like companies like Google implemented CSP into Inbox. Has anybody used Google Inbox? So I have a screenshot, but they have, so this goes back to that screenshot I had earlier with Gmail. Gmail has report only, and they're just slowly trying to figure it out, whereas Google Inbox actually has it in enforcement.
And the other thing I heard you mention, maybe that from a browser standpoint, are all major browsers supported? Is that IE is not supported? Is that an accurate statement or no?
No, IE is.
It is, okay.
But I think it's my next slide, or we're gonna talk about that. I was just gonna show you what a CSP violation looks like. I think it's, okay, 9090. What port am I using? Oh yeah, there we go. All right, so that was the issue. Okay. All right, so this is Twitter. If we look at their headers, they have a CSP policy in enforcement. So that's one of the other things. So one of the key differences, one of the ways you can tell if it's enforcement or not is different. Content security policy means enforcement, content security policy - report. means you're in report only. So they are enforcing it. And let me just generate some errors. So this is a Chrome extension. I'm just going to enable enforcement, and then I'm just going to say CSP violations. So what this extension is doing, actually, it's modifying the response coming back on the client side, and it's just introducing this CSP policy as opposed to the one that Twitter defined. And what that's going to do is that it's going to break the site. So this is what I mean by you want to start in report only and then slowly tweak it. And here I have the console open. Actually, let me just maximize this. Okay, that does not. Okay, there we go. Okay, it's not. But so you can actually see the CSP violations if you open up console, and you can see refuse to execute inline script, refuse to load style from this domain. Now, again, this is a Twitter trusted domain, so they can easily whitelist that. Refuse to load image, and refuse to load other image, except this time they're using a data URI. So all these violations actually also generated reports, and if we use an intercepting proxy, you'll definitely be able to see. So all of these requests right here are violations. And that's something that we're going to talk about that. But in your CSP stack, you will need an aggregator. And let me just maximize this. Oh, sorry. Let me see. Actually, I don't even know if I can maximize this. But so this request was generated by my browser. And in here, using this Chrome extension, I actually specified the endpoint. I could also just make it point to a different to a different host as well. But as you can see, Twitter post CSP violation. These requests are in fact going to them. I'm sure they're blocking this. They're not actually consuming this. But as you can see, here's the violation. JSON formatted. That's not very readable, so I'm just gonna show you this one. Right. So we'll typically, so that's actually blurred out. That's why there's a gap missing. The colors are kind of off. But you'll see policy, violated directive, script source. You'll see the original CSP that you had, and you'll see the blocked host. And this is what a CSP violation looks like. Any questions? Thoughts? All right. So we were talking about browser support, right? And you mentioned, is IE supported? So typically when you ask a question, is CSP supported, you kind of have to, there's actually two answers. It's kind of like, which version of CSP? So right now we're talking about the 2012 version, which is, the 1.0. And in the 1.0 world, it is supported, except it uses a different header. So as we can see, IE 10 and 11 have CSP 1.0 supported. It's just that they use the X content security header. And then in earlier versions of Safari, they had an X. Okay, I didn't correct this, but this is supposed to say X WebKit. Yeah, so X WebKit CSP. But in general, you can see that Chrome implemented since the beginning. So in general, it's not a browser limitation. It's not.
So what does it mean the browser does it? Will the browser ignore the header then, or will it
Actually,
Break the site.
break the site? Especially with IE8, which is still around.
I never thought about that. I'm going to assume that it's going to ignore it. I'll get back to you, but I never really thought about that. From my perspective, it's always been like, it works. So that's a good question. I'm trying to figure out if I can do a test right now. Jack, do you know?
Yeah, IE8's not gonna know what it is. I mean, IE8 doesn't know what the internet is, so. Yeah, like, doesn't know what CSP is.
So it's just going to ignore it, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's browser support. So now we talk about the present. And the present is actually a bit more exciting. Before it was just, what is CSP? So in last year, in July or so, the spec was actually updated, the 1.1, also known as level 2 CSP. And that actually introduced it introduced script source nonce and hash source hash source. So previously I kept using the word refactoring and inline. Now we don't have to do that. So the intent is these new additions were intended to facilitate CSP adoption. So let's say you have inline script. So the idea is that in your header, you specify a nonce. Yeah, you specify a nonce. Yep. And then in the actual code, you also just tag that snippet with that nonce. And then the browser will say, hey, nonce foo. I saw nonce foo in the header. And then if I see nonce foo in the actual HTML, I'm going to be able to execute this. So this way, you don't have to refactor all your code. You just kind of have to tag it. Now, that also depends on how many violations you have. If you just have 5 or if you have 100, it's something to consider. The other idea that was introduced in level 2 was this hash. So the idea is that you have inline code, you figure out the SHA-256 value of it, and then you just introduce that value in the header. The browser then will automate these hashes and be like, yep, I can run this. No, I can't run this. Thoughts?
How much longer does that take?
You mean to
Calculate, and then, I mean, is it slowing down the slice initially?
No, this is all low level Chrome. Chrome's awesome. No, not really. No. I mean, it's kind of like a browser also has to parse other security headers and so on, but no, not necessarily. Does this answer your question, Ken?
Yeah.
So you have 2 options for what CSP people call today's web. Instead of refactoring, you can just tag, or you can calculate the hash. Now, the next logical question is like, how do I do that? Am I going to do that manually? Is there a library to do that? And the answer is yes. There are many libraries. So we're talking about Node, we're talking about Rails, we're talking about PHP, we're talking about Django, we're talking about Java, we're talking about Perl. There's even this Apache module. I've never used that. And then I also created this bit.ly. And there's actually many more. Yeah, let's close that. But yes, if you go to that bit.ly, it just goes to a gist that I created. And it also includes like Clojure and a couple other libraries that I just wasn't able to fit here. And then any web app technology that you might use that isn't covered. I mean, there's so many, but the point is like generally thoughts. Okay. CSP libraries. All right. Who's using CSP? Does anybody know? Twitter. And Gmail. Anybody else? Who else? Who else is using? GitHub. All right. So it's basically, these are what you would expect. A lot of the Silicon Valley companies. We're talking about Twitter, Facebook, Send Safely, GitHub, Medium, Pinterest, PHPMyAdmin, LastPass, and since December, Gmail in report only. Who's not using CSP that I would like for them to use CSP? I'm talking about Etsy, Yelp, Wunderlist, and then PassPack, who's a competitor to LastPass. But in general, I mean, there's no financial companies using CSP. I don't think PayPal's using CSP. But there's no reason you shouldn't be using CSP. Again, any thoughts?
So why aren't they?
Because only just recently has level 2 been introduced. Because before it required a lot of refactoring. Now we have these. Some of these libraries are kind of new, actually. They were probably developed last year, to be honest. So some of these libraries are new. And in general, it just takes a while. I'm going to actually talk about that in the future. The idea is, how do you actually go about implementing CSP?
I was just going to elaborate on the answer a little bit. So my role in my company is as I run the application software security program. And on our end, when I learned that V2 was out, I went, oh, awesome, I can use CSP now. Because prior to version 2 coming out, getting any legacy system into using CSP was just an enormous chore because it would require a lot of refactoring as to where the JavaScript sat in your application. A lot of legacy apps have inline JavaScript all over the place. With the nonces, with some of the digest stuff that version 2 put in, it's still not really easy to do. Like, it's still not straightforward. It's still not like immediate. Like, I can't just go and be like 5 minutes, turn the switch, it's on, awesome, yay! But I don't have to go and it's not a 6-month project. It's like a 1-week project, which is a lot more doable. If you're
any experience with like third-party libraries like XJS or they or if you use components and stuff like that?
Sorry, could you rephrase that?
Yeah, do you have experience like how hard it is if your application uses like JavaScript libraries, for instance like XJS or web components? So we have like huge widgets that you put into your application.
I guess that depends on the JavaScript library itself, but like you saw, I'll tell you which extension I have. I mean, I couldn't tell you exactly, but if you want to get a sense of how many violations you're going to have to fix, you can use like a Chrome extension, enable it, like I did for Twitter. Do you want me to go to a particular site?
No, it's more for like applications that you build.
Okay.
Based on the whatever.
Correct. Yeah. I think mileage may. I'm not. Yeah. Couldn't quite tell you exactly. But there's a lot of libraries. I'm hoping a lot more companies begin using CSP. You have a question?
Yeah. I don't know if you think so, but in the companies you see implementing CSP or instances where you see CSP implemented, what have they seen in terms of the sliding scale? What have they done?
That's basically my next. That's what this is. So observe CSP headers. All right. So here I have Twitter, Facebook, LastPass. Now LastPass actually introduced their CSP header a long time ago. If we look at Twitter's, I don't know if everybody's able to see this, but so it's very clean looking. They don't appear to have many external domains. They want all their content loaded over HTTPS. So if you look at every single policy, it says, default source HTTPS, connect source HTTPS. But if you look closely at image source, remember how we were talking about how this right here refused to load image, data URI. If we actually look at the CSP policy, you'll see why it works, because they enable the data URI. It says image source HTTPS, and they also allow data URIs. If you look at the script source, you will see unsafe inline and unsafe eval. If you look at Facebook's, they definitely have a lot more external. So they have Akamai, Google Analytics, Virtual Earth, Atlas Solutions. I guess they trust all these external domains. If you look at LastPass in general, if you look closely right here, you see style source unsafe, script source unsafe, font source unsafe. So again, it's a scale. It's but all these companies are constantly improving their CSP. It takes a while. Here's Gmail's. It's the top one. So again, it's not. It can be challenging, but if you're a startup and you're creating a new product, it might be easier. If you're trying to integrate this into your flagship product like Gmail, it might take a while. If you introduce it into a new product like Inbox, boom. This is an enforcement content security policy. I should highlight that, make that cleaner. But then the top one, as you can see, it's in report only. So all these headlines saying Gmail prevents unsafe code, that was just wrong. That was not correct. It didn't prevent, it still got executed. The only difference is that now Gmail knows about it. Because it's in report only, they're gonna get some intelligence from this, which is good.
Good question. Well, I'm not sure if you're gonna get to this or not.
Yeah.
But I can jump against slides, forgive me. I was just looking at the last passes, which was like really, really short.
Yeah.
Compared to Google's, like Gmail's, which is really, really long. And Google's is really long because they have every single URL in there. It's like url1.gmail.com, url2.gmail.com, image.gmail.com. Everything is listed explicitly, whereas like LastPass is like star.lastpass.com. It allows anything with a subdomain. And that's one of the reasons why it's so much bigger. Google's is so much bigger that they like list out every single domain in that policy.
So yeah, if you look right here, subdomain LastPass, subdomain, Yahoo. Whereas in Gmail, they are specifically specifying every single one of their, various products, from Talk Gadget to Drive to clients5.google and so on. Any thoughts? All right.
If you run into a case where a page builds up more of itself, more HTML, like attribute-based scripts, would CSP block that second phase where they start running through?
Yeah, like HTML attributes. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
It's gonna prevent that. CSP stories. So let's talk about some of the challenges companies like Facebook and GitHub have. So one of the things that GitHub does is that they don't have a report URI. So if a violation does occur, they're not going to know about it. If they break their site, they're not going to know about it, and that's actually what happened to them. They're constantly pushing through the day, many commits to production. At one point, they broke the site. They didn't know about it because of CSP. However, one of their customers said, hey, GitHub's kind of broken, and by the way, here's the CSP violation, and then they were able to fix it. But again, that's more GitHub. One of the things they do differently is that for different subdomains, for GitHub versus GIST, they actually provide different CSP policies, which means that in GIST, you don't really have to protect that data. Whereas in GitHub, the main site, that's where you have all your API keys and such. So you can define different policies and you can make them safe or less safe depending on what data you're trying to protect. In the case of Facebook, they were trying to detect browsers. In early on, when the code wasn't as robust, you can actually just throw like an esoteric Facebook, like 12 or 13, and boom, you didn't actually get a CSP header. In Send Safely, they were trying to do browser detection through an Apache module. They scrapped that. So these are things to consider from a pen tester perspective. Like, how can I get, I don't want the CSP. This is making my life difficult. PHP MyAdmin, they actually introduced a CSP. Initially, it didn't even work. But yeah, this was something that you could download and it didn't work from the beginning. So that was just a challenge. Any thoughts, questions? Okay. So this is the future. This is where I talk about what's coming up for the spec, and then also how can we go about implementing CSP. So what's coming up in CSP? So in general, there's one trend, and the one trend is X-frame options and then XSS protection. Those headers, they're now going to get pulled in to the CSP header. So that's going to be introduced in CSP 2.0. So expect that. I have no idea, maybe a year from now, maybe 6 months from now. So some of those security headers are going to get pulled in. They also have this idea of path matching, which means that instead of trusting the entire domain, you can just trust a certain path. So that's enough about CSP. Let's talk about steps towards CSP. So this is where I'm going to talk about a couple tools, but things to actually be cognizant when you're going to implement this. So one, implement this in all environments. Dev, staging, prod. Don't just start in prod. Don't assume all environments are really the same, even though they technically they should be. The other thing is use your employees as testers. So while you're developing your CSP policy, before you introduce into production, have your dev teams, have your QA teams, have your security teams, have all these various teams generate policies for you. And I'm not saying, hey, this is a task. I'm saying, like, while they're doing their jobs, they will actually generate policies. How to create policies. So one of the things that I demoed earlier was a Chrome extension. Now, this Chrome extension is called Casper Enforcer, and all it's doing is basically modifying the response and then tweaking, adding a CSP header. So we can do report only, and then we can see all the various policies here. And then again, so this is client side, introducing CSP at the client side. This is Chrome. What else do I have? There's one called, for Firefox, it's called User CSP. There's also CSP Tester. There's also no CSP. So if you don't want a CSP policy and for whatever reason you don't want it there, you can use that and it'll just get rid of it. You can also go to this bit.ly and you'll see all these tools. You'll see the GitHub. You'll see just the gist pointing to the GitHub. One of the ways that Netflix goes about implementing, actually, no, sorry, not Netflix, Etsy. One of the ways that Etsy goes about introducing, figuring out their CSP tools is that they have a tool, this crawler, and it's Selenium based. So you're able to define a Selenium use case, like, do these actions, and while the crawler is performing these actions, it will also generate violations for you. So these are some of the tools that are out there to help create CSP policies. Actually, let me show you. Actually, yes. So yeah, let me just show you. So this is Casper. One of the things that Casper does is that it also has a, that's Casper and Forrester. This is Casper. Casper is an aggregator. So this is already an open source CSP violation aggregator that you can deploy. And it's, if we look here, so if you just check out the code, it's based on Mongo, and then you just run the app, and then you'll get this. So you'll be able to create projects. So here I created an OWASP. I can't look into that other one, but if you deploy this internally, create a CSP violation that points to this, and then once you actually collect violations, you'll be able to see all the various inline and eval code that is producing violations. You'll see it here. There's also a policy. This tool is actually, it definitely helps when creating a CSP violation. So check that out. Casper, there's also another one called CSP Reporter. Yandex. Yandex is, has anybody heard of it or use it? Does anybody use it? No? It's basically the Russian equivalent of Google. They have CSP implemented. They created this tool. It's called CSP Reporter, or you can just create a custom one. So again, accept all these JSON posts, and then use something like Elasticsearch or Kibana to basically, one, separate the environments. Like, here's my CSP violations from production. Here's my CSP violations from dev and the various staging environments. And you should be able to definitely see trends. So the moment you introduce new code, voila, or over time as you're refactoring your CSP violations, you'll definitely be able to see that. And so if you just go there, you'll be able to see. So this is what Kibana actually looks like. And this, I don't know if you can see, but earlier when I said, here's a company that doesn't have CSP, one of those was Yelp. This is their Kibana. They don't have it yet, but hopefully they'll have it, within, the next year. But this technically is a screenshot of their Kibana stack, Elasticsearch Kibana stack, and they're able to figure out various trends and such. This one here at the bottom is for user agent. So they're, in this particular case, IE is generating iOS and so on. And then here's actually my last slide. So, CSP is definitely, it's an additional layer of security. If you have XSS and you have a CSP policy that's kind of secure, it's going to be very difficult to exploit these XSS attacks. So when you're implementing CSP, just set realistic goals. Think about how you're pushing your CSP rules, how many apps you want to make compliant, whether it's your flagship product, whether it's new products. Think about what your CSP stack is going to be. If you're going to use open source tools, if you're just going to create a custom app with Elasticsearch and Kibana stack. How many CSP violations do you have? Do you just have, you might just be able to refactor that. But if you have over 200, you might have to come up with a plan. So just, set realistic goals, and hopefully everybody, if some of you are responsible for creating sites, hopefully you guys will implement CSP. Questions? All right. Oh.
So you mentioned the different environments, fully test, development, testing, and production, and maybe staging too. Is it conceivable for people to use different libraries for different environments? And if so, is it easy to transform the policy from one stage to the next, one environment to the next?
So we're talking about different environments. What do you mean by using different libraries? Or are you talking about different ways of deploying the CSP?
I guess, well, what I'm thinking of is people might use a different configuration file, like for a database connection string, for example. Different database connection string for production versus testing versus development.
So
is it possible for people to use different JavaScript libraries or image libraries based on which environment they're in?
Absolutely.
Right. So my real question is it easy to transform automatically the policy from one environment to the other?
I mean, no, the policy is going to have to be set like for the environment, right? Or if you figure out some way.
In a build script
Correct.
to transform it, yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to be. But one of the things just to be aware, just to be, again, when there's a violation reported, you'll see the original. So if you can somehow figure out a way to separate this as well within the actual CSP violation stack. Yeah. So how many of you are developers? The majority of you? Okay. 4. Okay. Excellent. Any remaining questions? There we go.
I don't know if it's resoluted, but what if I have an iframe which loads like another URL?
Correct.
And that contains my Google code. Does this fix that?
So for one, there's a CSP directive called image source, and you'll be able to specify which domains you're allowed to iframe. Correct. So there's eval code there. Depending on your CSP policy, if that eval code tries to create a WebSocket connection to eval.com and your connect source has a wildcard, then no. But if you say connect source none, then this WebSocket, even though there's malicious code was introduced, it will not be able to make that call. So yeah, it will definitely help you out. But that also depends on your CSP violation, on your CSP. That's why I said it just makes it very difficult to attempt to then actually exploit XSS and so on. All right. Do we have any closing words?
Closing words, Mike?
Very, very briefly. Yeah. Thanks to Jella for doing this. It's awesome. You have these slides up on SlideShare, is that right? On SlideShare. SlideShare, awesome. And yeah, hope to see everybody again. Do we have a lined up officially for March yet, or are we still kind of tentative?
We potentially have a speaker lined up for March on mobile security, and then we have already 2 people who already want to talk in April and May. So just keep an eye on the meetup page, and we'll have those already set up for the next couple months. We are still looking for more speakers, as Mike had said, so please let us know. We'd love to get more folks to be speaking for the chapter between now and the new year. And then I did a check on our pizza and beer situation. For those who are still hungry, please take some pizza with you. For those who are taking public transportation, please drink some beer. For those who are driving, I'm sorry, but maybe next time. But yeah, cool. Thank you, everyone.